So I just got to thank both of you for, well, Ian, you suggested the film, right?
Yep.
So thank you to Ian and Keith for coming today to discuss Heaven Can Wait. It was a film that Ian picked out that he has some interest in, and I'm hoping that Keith is, game to talk because obviously he came along. So, Ian, why don't you start by telling us why this movie came up, what makes you want to talk about it, and yeah, just go.
Okay. Well, I'm a big fan of romance films, especially when they're done right. And essentially, this film is a romance film, essentially. But I remember seeing this. The first time I saw this was on VHS a long time ago when we used to have VHS and Betamax. Because I'm from this Catholic family, my dad, I don't know if you know about Lent. So you have to give something up for Lent every year when Easter starts. And so my dad was a strict Catholic, so he made us give up stuff. But he forced us to give up watching films for 40 days and 40 nights. So that's what we did. We were pissed off about it because we love watching films, but he made us do that because of being Catholic, I guess. And then when on the day when it was finished, on the actual night it was finished, we used to have this day called the Marathon Day, which we used to rent all these films and watch from 9 o'clock in the morning straight through till 4 o'clock in the morning of the next day. If we can keep up, that is, because we'd fall asleep. And on that day, we rented out Rocky 1 and 2 and 3, which we saw back to back. We saw Heaven Can Wait, and I think War Games. I can't remember what the last one was, but that's when I saw Heaven Can Wait after watching 3 Rocky films, and I was still engaged after watching 3 Rocky films, and I thought it was absolutely a great movie. Then I investigated. Obviously, I just thought it was a standalone film, but obviously it was a remake of a film called Here Comes Mr. Jordan. And that's where my love of this film started. I just think it's a really enjoyable, romantic, clever little movie. I don't know what you thought, Keith, but there you go. But that's my history on this film.
Yeah, Keith, what do you have history? Is this your first time watching, or you watched a lot of times, or?
Yeah, no, I have to confess that today was the first time I'd ever seen this film. I've always been very aware of it, and obviously know a lot of the people that were involved in it and the iconography and all that. And I do remember it from sort of the VHS days and whatever when I was a kid. But for some reason, and this happens sometimes with films, it's one of those films that just passed me by. I never caught it on home video or TV or anything. So I literally never watched it. And then when you kindly invited me on this, I mean, that's one of the reasons I enjoy doing this. I mean, as you well know, I love talking about movies and stuff in general, but it's also making me discover things that I'd not seen before, as well as revisit things I might not have seen in a long time, like we did with, taking a Pelham 1, 2, 3 last time. And I'm a bit of a completist. So what I actually did in the case of this is I watched Here Comes Mr. Jordan first, which is a 1941 film. And I have to admit that most of my knowledge of film, I've been studying film all my life, but most of my knowledge of film that I used to see either on television as a child or on video a bit later was essentially from the 1960s onwards up until contemporary. And there are there are exceptions, but there are a lot of films from that sort of 1940s era that I've not seen. I've certainly not seen enough of them. And I really enjoyed Here Comes Mr. Jordan. I thought that it was really ahead of its time, for when it was made. I thought it was really imaginative. I know obviously this is based on a play. And I thoroughly had a great time with that. And likewise with Heaven Can Wait. I was surprised of how similar they were. I mean, they literally stuck to the play quite closely, and really the only difference between the the two films was the fact that it was obviously contemporized for Heaven Can Wait, so set in the 70s rather than the 40s, and instead of him being a boxer, they changed it to he was a pro-American footballer. But other than that, I mean, the character names were the same, and the basic was more or less scene for scene identical. So
the dialogue as well. Some of the dialogue.
No, absolutely. I really enjoyed it, and obviously Warren Beatty. I didn't realize until I watched this that he co-directed it as well, because I know he produced things like Bonnie and Clyde earlier in his career, and I believe he directed Shampoo before this, which actually is another film I've not seen. I'm embarrassed to say, and he and Buck Henry co-directed this, and I had a great afternoon watching the two adaptations back to back, and I thought that they both stood up in their own right for sure. So it was great. What about you, Finn? I mean, had you seen this before?
No. I think you answered pretty good at picking movies that, for whatever reason, I've never heard of ever, that apparently I really should have. So I wanted to watch the Here Comes Mr. What was it? Jordan. But I didn't get a chance to. But I did watch Heaven Can Wait. And I wasn't sure what to expect, honestly. But actually now that I hear that it's based off a play, right? The original,
right. By Harry
Segal. It has that feel, actually, because like it had like a segmented, like 4-act kind of feeling to it versus like other movies where I've seen where it's just like, here's this bit, now we're progressing to this next stage of the story, and it felt like very contained in those locations too. Like it really could have just been like taken from it and stuck on a stage, which I guess you also answered my other question, because since I didn't see the first one, I was wondering if it was the same sport or like how it had transferred. But I guess if they're boxing, that'd be even easier to have on a stage to like show the sport versus trying to like visualize, for instance, a soccer game, right? That's like, wait, no, what's it called in Europe?
It's just called American football.
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't want to confuse it with the European football,
which is soccer. Yeah.
Right. But, no, that sounds really cool, though, actually. So, so what?
I mean, one of the things I love when we do this, and I always find this, because it's that old thing, no matter how many movies you watch and stuff, you'll just never ever catch up, and you end up going down a bit of a rabbit warren, because upon looking at this and Here Comes Mr. Jordan, and then there was actually a sequel to Here Comes Mr. Jordan called Down to Earth, which is what they actually named the third adaptation of this film, which was the Chris Rock, Eugene Levy film in 2001, which I didn't watch, by the way. So there was a sequel to the first film, but also that sequel was remade as the film Xanadu. So that's what I mean. You end up everything's sort of connected, and you end up like really going down this, because I like to sort of research these things, and you end up really going down a rabbit hole, Warren, and you think to yourself, my God, if I could literally watch about a dozen movies just spinning off from this one. So it is fascinating.
I find the film, as I said, first and foremost, it's a romance, in my opinion. But I find it's really strange because I guess very little about the Warren Beatty character. They don't do a deep dive into his character at all. But yet, you kind of like him because he's got a good heart. I mean, the best scene in the film, in my opinion, is the boardroom meeting, when he has the boardroom meeting and he invites all the press in. Your heart just jumps when he says, we're gonna have to get rid of all this stuff, and let's not forget about the money, let's just do what's right and stuff like that. And it's one of those things that humans want to happen in real life, but we know it doesn't, basically because of greed and stuff like that. And that scene to me is priceless. Another thing, I watched Heaven Can Wait without knowing Here Comes Mr. Jordan existed. So when I watched Here Comes Mr. Jordan, I found it very goofy. The whole of the actual humor is very goofy, and I love, because like in the 40s they always used to say this, why I order. That's what they always used to say, right? You know, when they shake their fist, and there's that line, why I order. And they did that in Mr. Jordan. I was killing myself laughing. And but the whole thing about him falling in love with the girl in the black and white version didn't work, because there wasn't enough development between him and the girl. So it's more or less about Mr. Jordan. It's more or less about the problem that he was in, more so than the romance. And then the one thing I like about the Warren Beatty version is that he instantly falls in love with her immediately when he sees her, and that score kicks in without any words whatsoever. You know that he's done for. He really is. He's done for. He's helplessly in love with this woman that actually turns up at his door. So that's another great thing about the movie when you compare it to Here Comes Mr. Jordan, is that you know immediately that's in love, even though he doesn't say the words. And Mr. Jordan, played by who's he played by, Keith? In the
new version or the original?
The Warren Beatty version.
In the Warren Beatty version, it's James Mason.
Yeah, James Mason. Yeah.
And in the original, it was Claude Rains.
Yes.
Yeah.
So James Mason immediately knows that he's hooked. He's in love with this girl. That's why he suggests, that why don't we just make it temporary? When he says, let's make it temporary, he kind of agrees to it. Without any obstacles. He just says fine, because he knows that he's in love. And obviously he's with the creator. He knows that there's a plan, so he just allows it to happen. But those, and also, I don't know about you guys, but did you notice there's this really puzzling scene in the film, which I have not found an answer for out of all the years. When I first saw it, I was puzzled. And even today, I'm still puzzled, and there's no answer on the internet anywhere. Do you remember the scene where he says, "Are you hungry?" And she goes, "Yeah." And he goes, "Well, and she goes, "Oh," he goes, "Oh, let's go out then." And they end up in McDonald's.
Oh, yeah.
And there's that scene in it where he's at the back of the car, and he's saying all these words, and the driver is rolling his eyes, but the driver looks like Max. In fact, it looks like the same actor played the driver and Max in the film, and I'm totally confused. I'm trying to
Jack Warden.
Yeah, look at that scene very carefully. It looks like Jack Warden with the hat on, and they make no
because it wasn't his butler. No, it wasn't.
No, it was just the driver. And what I'm saying is that they make no, if it is him, they make no bones of trying to disguise him or anything. It looks like I may be wrong, but it looks like that actor. It really does. So I tried to find that information. I couldn't find that information on it at all. So if anybody knows, let me know. Let me know. Maybe I'm wrong. It might be somebody. It might be somebody that just looked like him.
That it wouldn't be a surprise, because I mean, like, sometimes there was just, for whatever reason, a place where they inserted an actor just playing different roles. That's definitely not something that hasn't happened before.
Yeah. I just find it confusing. But anyway, apart from that, I think the film is a joy personally, but I did feel sad at the ending, and I tell you why. It's because everything that Joe was disappeared.
It's gone, yeah.
Yeah. And that made me feel sad, because, all he wanted was to, be part of, and win the Super Bowl and do whatever, and stuff like that. But it's really sad that all that he was had disappeared completely, and he became this new person and didn't remember what happened. And, he gets the girl in the end, but does he get the girl? Because he's not really him.
It's not really him, yeah. And it's sad for Corkle as well, because obviously, and I felt this actually more in Heaven Can Wait than in Here Comes Mr. Jordan. Yeah. But obviously Corkle knows, played by Jack Warden in that film, knows you know, who he is and all this, but of course doesn't remember that at all. And yeah, it is, you're right. I mean, I did sort of feel that the end, one could argue it's a happy ending, but it is kind of a bittersweet ending, really, because it is sort of sad that something, you know, that whole other life is completely forgotten about. And yeah, it was. I mean, I think both films work. I did enjoy the 1941 version, but in that they obviously, Corkle is more of a sort of, you know, slapstick comedic character in that version than Jack Warden, who's still obviously very funny, but there was a little bit more heart to the 78 version. Yeah.
But I mean, I don't know what you did. Did you think the romance worked, Finn? Did you think the movie is of worth? I mean, you know, you've never seen it before, and you're seeing a film that was shot in 78. Oh no, it wasn't shot in 78. It came out in 78, didn't it? So I guess. So I mean, I mean, what do you think of Julie Christie? I mean, I think she's gorgeous personally, but
well, you know, there's just like a style of acting that you just kind of don't get anymore, because it was very theatrical. Like, well, you know, like going off the whole play thing. But like, even when you like go back and watch old like family sitcoms or, you know, shows from back like in the 50s and 60s, they're all overacted kind of. So like I found myself in the first scene where they're interacting and she just keeps talking and talking and talking and talking. I was like, oh my God, somebody just like shake her and make her stop, because she just kept going and going. But like it kind of works, you know, got into like the whole idea that, you know, that's her character and she's super passionate and stuff about it. But like I was like, I don't feel like you can technically write it like that now. Like it would have to be portrayed very differently, I think, because she's a little too manic.
I don't know. I think you could still do it contemporary. I mean, I never want this film remade. It's been remade too many times. But I even like the bit where they go upstairs and the guy's drowning, isn't it? And you know, and he tries to warn everybody. What's that?
And he was calling for help, and he was like, some poor guy drowning. And and I like the idea that he becomes him, but he can just see himself. You know, he doesn't physically look like him. He just sees himself, doesn't he? It's like quantum leap.
Yeah, I was going to say exactly that. It's something that it reminded me of that I have always been a big fan of, and you can certainly see the inspiration was, you know, Quantum Leap. You can see that Donald Belisario, who was the, you know, TV producer, director, and creator of Quantum Leap, definitely kind of borrowed from this film in the way that, you know, he's got the friend that nobody else can see and hear, and he's got, you know, and he sees, everybody else sees him different to how he sees himself in the mirror, and all of that sort of thing. And again, he's leaping, sort of doing good deeds and then moving on. And I definitely, that was one of the first things I thought, actually, even when I was watching the 1941 version. I was thinking, oh my, there's a real sort of Quantum Leap vibe to this. You know, which is cool.
What did we guys think of? I know they did it in the original as well, but what did you guys think of the idea that it's a way station and they have the Concorde waiting for them to go to their final destination? Because they did that in the original version, but they had an old-fashioned plane, didn't they? And
that's right. I mean, that was the other sort of difference, apart from him being a boxer instead of and a football player. It was he had a plane crash accident in the original, whereas obviously, you know, he gets you know, run over, which I thought they filmed actually quite well, because they didn't show it. We just heard it in the tunnel. But I thought it I kind of like the idea, the sort of faux stairway to heaven.
You know? Yeah. As I said, when I first saw it, I said I saw it on VHS, and I've never seen it on the big screen. I just imagined those shots look quite nice on the big screen, where he's walking and there's nothing; it's just smoke or clouds or whatever it is, with Buck Henry, and Buck Henry was quite funny in the film, I thought, because he co-directed it, didn't he?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, as I said, I think it's first and foremost a romance, but the romance doesn't dictate the film. If there was a fault I wanted to point out in the film, it would be the ending bit where the detective turns up, and that whole situation resolved very, very quickly. But it was very, very silly as well. I mean, you wouldn't really, yeah.
What?
So
yeah, the hat thing.
Yeah. As I said, I thought that scene was. It looked like a stop point in the story where they had to wrap things up quickly, and they couldn't let those two, the couple, get away with murder, because it's about heaven, I guess. So they had to insert this thing in, especially in the original. They did the same thing as well.
Yes. Yeah.
So I think that's the only fault in the film. The performances were terrific from Warren Beatty. I just like Warren Beatty, the way he performs. He performs like a child most of the time. I don't know if you got that, but he was also very knowledgeable. He found that balance between them both. I don't know what you thought, but yeah. I don't know what you thought about his performance.
Fine line between adulthood and immaturity.
Yeah. Because the first thing you would do is, if you found out somebody was going to try and kill you, is to avoid them. maybe live somewhere else. Go somewhere else.
Glazed that over and just didn't even give it a thought. No, it's just like, should I live with two people that tried to kill the body that I'm in? It's cool. I'll just have dinner with them. Nothing will happen. Oh, they tried to get me again. It's all cool. But they tried to get me again. Oh, no, it's cool.
Yeah. I think in both versions they really sort of played on the sort of social status, the sort of class aspect of it. With him being sort of a working class sportsman who was obviously very, very passionate and knowledgeable about and physical about that particular field, but obviously getting thrown into this world of wealth and corporate corruption and wheeling and dealing and all of that sort of thing, and it was they really got the sort of fish out of water element in both films, because I felt that they nailed that quite well in the 1940s version as well. But it's very enjoyable. Very enjoyable. As I said, I'm surprised I'd not seen it before, and actually I'm very grateful to you both for for suggesting we do this and getting to sort of visit something, another decent film that as I said, I was loosely aware of but hadn't really seen. So awesome.
Also, the casting again for 70s movies is always spot on, in my opinion. Like, for instance, when he goes into the boardroom and they're all talking and stuff, and that guy with the bald head and the black moustache, he nods to Charles. Was it Charles Grogan? Charles Grogan, is it the guy? Yeah. And he comes out and he says, "What does he think he's doing?" When you look at that guy, he just looks like someone that belongs there. He looks like someone that that really tells everybody off on the table and stuff.
I think that actor's Keen Curtis, and he was kind of well known for playing those sort of roles in TV and movies and stuff. But I mean, I did, as I was looking into it, I did actually look up some trivia, and one of the things that was quite interesting was Warren Beatty really, really pushed quite hard to try and get Cary Grant to play Mr. Jordan.
Oh, wow.
By that point, Cary Grant had already retired from acting, and he couldn't persuade him to do it. I mean, obviously, ending up with James Mason is cool anyway.
Yeah.
But it was quite interesting that's what Warren Beatty wanted to do. And apparently he didn't even initially, when he was developing and got the rights for this, didn't actually want to star in the film himself. He wanted Muhammad Ali to star in it. And couldn't, yeah, no, seriously, and couldn't get that to work, and then ended up and it ended up being, well, I'll play the lead character as well. They were obviously going to keep it as a boxer at that point. And but yeah, I mean, again, I don't know whether this is nonsense, but it's stuff that I read online when I was trying to find out a bit more about the film's history and the production, because obviously I watched it on Amazon, so there was no commentaries or anything to check out. So I just kind of Googled it instead. But yeah, quite fascinating, really.
I just, as I said, I was just a bit puzzled by his character. He, like, when Max goes to visit him and he's watching all this old film of the games and stuff, he's just out. His place is nowhere. It's just out there somewhere, and it doesn't look like he has any friends at all. That's what it seemed like to me, because like it was his birthday, right? So, and Max was the only one around his house with a cake. It seemed like
it was I found that quite funny what he said, as an athlete, because I think Warren Beatty, when he made this, was around 40 or whatever, and I don't know whether the character was supposed to be, but he sort of said any other industry and I'd still be young.
Yeah.
But obviously, because he was a professional sportsman, that was kind of, and of course he was recovering from an injury, wasn't he, at the beginning of the film as well.
But that's what I'm saying. It's those little things. This is one of the reasons why, when you watch a good film, a well-directed film, it resonates after you've seen it. And I'm pretty sure with you two, I think the film has resonated with you. It's because they do these things that you subconsciously read, but you don't get it until somebody tells you. Like, for instance, I guess I'm guessing here, Finn, that it didn't occur to you that the Warren Beatty character was kind of a loner until I said it. Did it occur to you? No.
Not really, no.
Yeah, but to me, it seems like he was a loner, because especially where his house was, it was in the middle of nowhere, and he had a birthday and there was no one there. You know what I mean? He was on his own, and that, even when he's training, he's on his own, basically. So that's one of the reasons why I think the art of filmmaking's kind of slightly being lost today, when they don't do things, those shortcuts they don't do. I don't know what you think, Keith, but hey.
Yeah, I mean, I it depends on the material, but yeah, I mean, in the case of this, it's there's no doubt about it. It's quite well directed. I mean, it's interesting that it's co-directed in this particular case by two actors, essentially.
Yeah.
It was enjoyable. As I said, what surprised me is I was expecting it to be a much bigger departure from the original film.
Yeah.
And it actually wasn't that different. And I was pleasantly, surprised by that. But I have to ask, have you guys seen, because I've not, have you seen the 2001 Chris Rock version?
I have.
Okay, because obviously they've changed it to a stand-up comedian.
Yeah, it's terrible.
Point, right? Is
terrible.
it bad?
Yeah,
I watched the trailer and I must admit I didn't feel inspired.
So it was the newer one supposed to be like a comedy or something?
Yeah, basically,
yeah.
It's the same story, Finn, but the character's played by Chris Rock, and he's a comedian, and he gets knocked over by a bus. But the worst thing about that film is that you see the person that he is. So, even though you see Chris Rock, he's meant to be this old man. He goes into the body of this old man, and when he looks into the mirror, he can see the old man. And sometimes you see him in shots.
Right. Okay,
and he's a white guy as well. Yeah. So,
okay. Which I'm sure they play on that.
They played on,
right?
Of course, they played on it, and and the majority of it wasn't funny in my opinion at all. And the romance didn't work because you could tell the chemistry between Chris Rock and the woman that's playing. There wasn't any chemistry there at all. In Warren Beatty's film, they actually dated in real life. I think Julie Christie and
It's on a long list of romantic interludes that he had.
Yeah,
it's a different time.
But I mean, look, I don't know what you guys think, but I just love the scene where he's in the back of the car with her, and he's staring at her, and he looks down because she looks up at him. Do you know what I mean? It's that kind of awkward moment that he realized that he was in trouble because he just couldn't stop staring at her, and he was instantly in love with her. He tried to ignore it when he tried to get rid of the problem when he went to the boardroom and gave everybody what they wanted and stuff. And then when he came back, he was back to business. He wanted to, get out the body and, go and do the Super Bowl. But then when the other two turns up and they say, well, they found a body for him, he's happy. But when Sis comes in and says she's downstairs, suddenly he doesn't want to know, and he's off. Do you know what I mean? So as I said, with that kind of stuff that happens in movies, especially the movies made in those days, I have no doubt in my mind they actually talked about and made sure that worked in the film. But as I said, I could be wrong. That could have been a happy accident, kind of thing. So, but I thought they both worked really well, those two.
I didn't even realize it was a romance for the longest time, because at first I didn't know what this movie was when I started watching it. So at first I was like, oh, it's a 70s sports movie. I didn't realize that Ian wanted me to watch one of those. So I started watching it, and they get into this bit. And I'm like, oh, okay, maybe it'll be like a murder mystery whodunit kind of situation. That'll be cool. And then they're like, oh no, there's this girl involved. Oh, okay, well then he's gonna go like do this environmental, whatever else. And it's like, no, wait, he also still wants to do his football thing again. And so I was like, oh my gosh, I was like trying to figure out what the movie really was about. You know what I mean? Like usually like a really clear, concise plot. I mean, I get that what he wanted throughout the whole movie was just gosh darn be a quarterback in the Super. Well, that we're not. I'm pre-recording this, so I could say it. Super Bowl. It's a hot topic word right now.
Yeah, it is now. Yeah. Yeah.
But, so it just seemed kind of weird that. I mean, I've never really encountered a movie, I guess, that's kind of like that, where it felt like there was almost three different stories, kind of just like. So I was like, well, we could put them all together in this one. It's cool. And it's not like I don't mean it like it's a sloppy feeling or anything. It's just kind of like a very unique weave, I guess.
Yeah. I like the idea that they shadowed the when they shot him with the cannon.
Oh,
so all the way through the movie, you hear the cannon, and then when they decide to kill him.
They did that a little better than what they did in the 40s
yes,
version. But it's kind of weird because it's like the moral of this story is let's hope that fate doesn't make a mistake and can fix it before you're cremated.
And deal with whatever they give you as like, oops, here's a coupon. It won't make up for it. In fact, we have to send this one too. Here, have this other one, and you won't actually remember any of this. But
it's tragic. It really is. And one of the things I did notice, obviously seeing it in 4K, or it's not in 4K, but in high def, was that the some of the optical effects when Mr. Jordan was going to vanish from the scene, kind of, I bet they look great on video in the 70s, but kind of, or the 80s or whatever, but kind of looked a bit naff in high def on streaming.
But they shouldn't correct stuff like that. They should leave it because it was of its time, and it's a historical. Now you can look at it now. It's a historical film. So it should never be tampered with. Things like that. Yeah, of course. Take the original film and high def it and stuff like make it palatable so you can see more in the shot. But don't change anything of the movie. They should never do that. As I said, for me, this film always reminds me of Easter, and always reminds me of the just as I said, I do like. I would like to make a romance film one day, and I do like romance films, and I think this one was a pretty clever one. As I said, the scenes they're so small, but when you see them, you don't realize you're being pulled in. Like the bit where he has that party in his garden or acres of a garden, and they're walking back to the car. You know, they have the same lines in the 40s version, but it's done much better in the 1978 version, where, you know, she says, you know, well, you know, he asks her, you know, what do you think of me trying to be a football player? And, you know, she says, you can do anything you want. And then when he hugs her and he says that don't be afraid, you know, that kind of stuff, you know. And then he looks at her and he says, we've got a long life ahead of us, me and you, and stuff like that. It's very romantic. It's very, because Warren Beatty plays it so well. Do you know what I mean? He plays it like a lost little boy. He plays it like he's lost and he's just found gold. That's how he plays it. And that's why sometimes on screen the romance always works, because when you got one character that actually is deep into their emotion when they're playing it, that's how the romance works. You know, that's how it works. So it's those scenes that actually, for me, makes the film work really well. And I love the scene where he by the coach of the team, he says, well, that bastard, and he goes, what did he do to take the team? And he said, he offered me, I can't remember how much money it was, and he tends to cry. I thought that was hilarious personally. He just brought the team, you know, because he could afford to buy the team. But it makes you wonder how much money he actually had. It wasn't Pendleton was his real name. I can't remember his name.
Yeah, what was it? Good question.
Can't remember.
Pendleton
was his real. It was Joe Pendleton. His real name. Leo Farnsworth. Yeah, Leo Farnsworth. Yeah. That very, very kind of rich name. And they added that stuff with, you know, he likes to dress up like he's playing sport, polo, yeah. And he's never done it. He just likes wearing hats.
I've been kind of curious about this. So like they kept saying throughout the movie, you know, like everything happens for a reason, and they all have like that moment where, you know, like they might die or they might not or whatever. And so like they screw up with him, and then they like give him, like, they're looking for a temporary place. But like this last one that, you know, that he ends up choosing, right? He only chooses it because he sees the girl, but he only sees the girl because the guy, the escort, I don't know what you call him. That sounds horrible.
Yeah, the escort. Yeah.
But he makes him hang around, and he's like, just watch, just wait. So it's like, I was trying to figure out if like the whole reason he was there in the first place wasn't even for the football. It's just like that the escort guy knew that he would see the girl and fall in love, and it was kind of like maybe that was what he was given, maybe in exchange for the whole mess. Because if you think about it, he doesn't accomplish anything else while he's there, because he doesn't get to actually do any of the games. I'm sure they're not gonna, like, you know, do whatever he wanted to do in the board meeting, because he's just like spewing it off, and then he ends up getting killed, and obviously his wife will probably have all the money anyways. So it's like nothing he actually did mattered, except that he met this girl and they had a connection. And then he gives her some really vague comment about like looking for some guy with sparks in his eyes again. And so it's like there's that connection between them. But like the rest of the movie, it was just kind of like
general. Yeah, but that's why I say it's a romance film, because when you think about it carefully, it's all about that relationship. It's all about trying to save her community and her. Everything else is just a side thing, isn't it? The him trying to learn football, whatever. And in the end, I found it quite sad when I first saw it, and the last time I saw it was last week, obviously because of this, and I still found it sad that Joe didn't exist anymore. What was Joe? Essentially, Joe had been dispersed, and he became this other character. But then you can look at it another way, where that football player was destined to die on the field.
Yeah, Jarrett. So
they just put Joe into him, but just got rid of the memory of what happened, but he was still essentially Joe. You could look at it that way as well. So I don't know. I personally, I feel sad when I watch the ending, because as Joe is a very he's kind of a loner, and he's kind of a child, you know what I mean? But then when he was talking, when he became that character, when he was talking to her at the end, then he seemed more grown up, and it makes me come to believe that whatever Joe was gone. And that's why I felt sad at the ending. So, yeah, sorry, I'm thinking about this film too much.
No,
I should have just let it go.
No, I mean, I think to some extent it is sort of slightly ambiguous and open to interpretation, and I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. But yeah, I mean, I too felt the you know, as I used the term earlier, I found it bittersweet, because you know, on one hand it's sort of love conquers all, and you know, he not only was able to potentially rekindle his love for her, like almost like they were destined to be together, but likewise, because he ended up going into the body of a footballer, he was able to continue his passion as well. You know, on that angle, and again, that was the same with the 1940s one, because he ends up, you know, going into another boxer in that one, doesn't he? But yeah, you know, the fact that he has no memory of any of that, and basically that character, well, he was cremated. As far as history was concerned, he died and was cremated, right?
But I tell you what, though, in the 40s version, which Finn hasn't seen, what happens at the ending is the same thing. Only one thing that's different in the 40s version than the 1978 version is that Corkle was left on his own in the 1978 version, but in the 40s version, the guy that he went into fired his other coach and hired Corkle. So Corkle still had a future with the boxer. But in this one, Corkle was just left in the locker room, depressed that his friend was gone.
Yeah, Corkle was kind of, even though they do exactly the same thing, I felt that from a character point of view, Corkle was more of a departure, because in the it really was sort of almost bordering on slapstick comedy. In the 40s one, particularly the whole business with the police. And of course, you know, they use, again, in both versions, they use the saxophone as the sort of
it wasn't a saxophone. What was it, Finn? It was the one in 78, clarinet. Yeah, so he had a clarinet. In the other one, he had a saxophone, didn't he?
Yeah. I don't know. I don't do jazz and all that. It all sounds like noise to me. So the whole time, I couldn't tell whether he was notably bad at playing it or notably good at playing it whenever the guy was like, he's playing. Because it's just like, it was just noise to me. But I thought that was a pretty neat trick.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it was a device, wasn't it? So that he can make Corkle know it was him. You know, when he played, believe that it was him, and then they added the thing with his neck as well, which didn't happen in the 40s. The 40s version so that Corker will no doubt that Joe is inside Leo. So but it makes you wonder what Leo actually looked like. You know what I mean? Was he an older chap?
We never actually see it in the which do they? I'm just trying to think. In the 40s,
no, they didn't.
No, they don't either, do they? They explain it in exactly the same way. But it is weird though, because you can sort of, both films do reek of the fact that they are essentially a stage play, and you can kind of tell. You know, it's but that doesn't make it bad. It's just it just seems kind of you know, like fairly obvious that it is in sort of hindsight. But I don't know. I'm almost tempted to see Down to Earth just to see what they do.
You'll be sorry, but it's really, as I said, again, it's kind of it's a romance comedy sort of thing, and the bit where he goes into the room and he has to hide behind the curtains. Charles Durin has to hide behind the curtains and stuff. And it's like, oh, I don't love you and you don't love me. Let's get a divorce. And he walks out and it's like, well, wouldn't you be slightly worried they're going to still try and kill you? Do you know what I mean? So it's those kind of things that were, I guess you have to kind of, you kind of have to think over it, because it's a comedy.
Suspend your disbelief.
Yeah, that kind of thing. Yeah. So, but apart from the detective thing at the ending, which I thought was a bit odd, it felt like they just threw it in there to complete the story. Everything else to me worked, and even a bit at the beginning where he's running up the hill, that, because I've been to LA, that reminds me so much of going to LA where we were walking up that kind of hill where and especially the sun and stuff like that. So it was obvious they shot that in LA.
Yeah, like Griffith Park or something. Yeah.
So, but as I said, there's some really good bits in it that the 40s film didn't do. I like the scene where he's trying to prove himself on the pitch, where they crush him, don't they? They try to stop him from achieving it, and he says, well, if I can't get the ball there, then yeah, I'll just walk away. And he gets it, doesn't he? Gets the ball there. There's those kind of moments that make the film work very well, in my opinion, because you're always rooting for Joe, and then when those things happen, it kind of satisfies you as a person watching it. But yeah. So I really like this film, as you can tell.
No, it's good. I'm liking the fact that you're suggesting films, to Finn and to Finn, and then thank you to Finn for inviting me along on the journey as well. But that you're suggesting things that we might not have seen, we might have missed or whatever. I mean, even Pelham 1, 2, 3, which I had seen, I hadn't watched it in a long time, so it's really good to go back and revisit things. And as I said, I didn't bother with the sequel to Here Comes Mr. Jordan is actually a musical, so I haven't.
Xanadu.
Which was again remade into Xanadu. Which again I've not seen. I've got to be honest. I know it's a
long time ago.
I've
You never seen it?
No.
No. The thing is,
for it looked like there's like a lot of feather boas or something, or maybe I'm thinking of a movie.
It had Gene Kelly? Gene Kelly in Xanadu?
Oh, I like Gene Kelly.
Gene
Possibly.
Kelly and Olivia Newton-John was in Xanadu. Olivia Newton-John.
Yeah, Olivia
Gene Kelly.
Sure.
Yeah. And the guy that was played Swan in the Warriors, Michael Beck, I think his name was. So I remember my sister loved it when she saw it, and I remember really fancying Olivia Newton-John at that time, because there's a scene in it where she's on roller skates and stuff, and she looked gorgeous, and I just went to see the film for her, basically. But it's a terrible movie.
I've done the same for other actors, so
yeah.
I went to see the first 3 Transformers movies just because I was crushing on Shia LaBeouf back in the day. So.
Shia LaBeouf, or Buff, or his name is.
I was a Transformers fan of the cartoons and whatnot. I did not like the movies, but I did like Shia LaBeouf, so that's why I saw them. Not because I thought they were good Transformers movies.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Megan Fox didn't look too bad either in the film. But as I said, I want to introduce you guys to films that had kind of slipped under the radar after so many years, because I remember before I saw this film on VHS, there was a cinema when I was growing up. There was 2 cinemas where I was growing up. There's one called the Granada and one called the Ruby. And I remember when I used to go to school, we used to walk past the Ruby. And do you remember in the old days where they used to have the little they used to have posters up in the cinema? They used to stick posters up in the cinema with the glass thing, and you couldn't touch the posters, whatever. I remember walking past it because it's an iconic picture with him in the tracksuit and the wings.
Yeah, with the wings.
Clouds.
Yeah, which is that's what I mean. The imagery. I've always been very aware of the film because of that. But as I said, it's just and it's got a great cast, but it just been for some reason just not ever got round to actually watching it. But
because we're a lot older than you, Finn, I guess you wouldn't have made the connection with the poster. I guess this is the first time you're seeing the poster, or because the poster is very iconic.
Yeah, the only sports-related Angels that I remember is Angels in the Outfield from way back.
I remember that. Yeah. Yeah, I remember that. That was a spate of spate of sports movies, I guess, at the time. Bull Durham was one of them, and and there were just loads of them at one point, wasn't there? But
that was later. I mean, I remember those. But this again was a bit earlier, and it would have been something that I would have either caught on TV eventually or home video. But as I said, just for some reason,
I'm quite surprised you hadn't watched it.
No,
or you hadn't heard of it.
No, I'd heard of it, but as I said, it was just one that slipped
past you by, slipped by you. I can't believe that film slipped by you, Mr. Isles. Usually catch them.
There's a lot of films out there, It's like
there is. No, definitely there is. But as I said, it's I could pick films like Ghostbusters or whatever and stuff like that, but they're really known. But I'd like to pick a film that's just kind of slightly under the radar, but you've heard of it, but maybe you haven't seen it.
Yeah, and that's exactly what this was.
Yeah, and they're interesting because the premise is interesting. Do you know what I mean? Like, as I said, taking a Pelham 1, 2, 3. A lot of people forget about that movie, but in reality, it's a classic. Even though the industry or the film industry don't deem it as a classic, I think it's a classic. You just got to look at it. Do you know what I mean? It's the same thing with Heaven Can Wait. It's got this iconic poster that nobody refers to anymore, because I remember that poster was everywhere. And do you remember in the old? Well, I don't know how old you are, Finn, but when you got a VHS player or Betamax player, they used to send you things in the post where they show you all the films that are coming out that year, and it was like a little booklet. I don't know if did you ever used to get them, Keith? The booklets used to come through the post, and you used to open them, and you used to see all the films that are coming out, all the VHS that are coming out that year.
Don't remember.
No, you don't remember that?
Was it a magazine or something?
It was like a little booklet that they that they used to, because like once you get a VHS or a Betamax, whatever, then I guess they have
What?
I had a Betamax.
That was way back, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, no, VHS and Betamax, they came out at the same time.
It was the war, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I remember that my dad had a Betamax and a VCR, and I still have his Betamax. I found it out in their garage, and it had all the hookings up and all the old like beta tapes. Yeah. I got like 2 of the 3 original Star Wars movies.
Cool. Yeah, that'd be worth the money.
Yeah, right.
Well, it's like people out there have HD DVD players, which again, it lost the war to Blu-ray. Yeah.
But they used to send out booklets. They used to send out I don't know what they call them now, and they used to come in the post. And so, you would open it, and then there'd be all these films that are coming out from Warner Brothers and from CIC Video. Do you remember that CIC Video?
Yes. Yeah. They distributed Paramount and Universal, I believe. Yeah.
And I remember seeing I remember seeing the iconic VHS of Heaven Can Wait and stuff like that, and they used to cost a lot of money. I remember the first video we actually brought and we saved up for it was Enter the Dragon, and that was like 72 quid to buy Enter the Dragon on Betamax. And we were sorry.
The first one we got was Raiders of the Lost Ark, but I think it was about 20 quid.
Oh well, I mean, we're talking about when
Yeah.
when video was actually breaking. Because my dad was fortunate to get a Betamax, because my dad was into electronics and used to fix TV and stuff like that. And he said to me, the Betamax picture's so much better than the VHS, and he is right. It's far more clearer than the quality of VHS.
Technically, it was supposed to be superior, even though it kind of lost the war. But it's in terms of history of home media, that's supposed to be the case. Yeah.
and he was a very big fan of Sony. He always thought that the Sony TVs had the better blacks on the screen. Yeah. And so when the Betamax came out, he looked at it and he was like, the actual picture itself is much better than the VHS. And actually, the actual Betamax players, they looked cooler than the VHS. I mean, there was the C7 and the C5.
Oh wow!
I don't know which one. Yeah, I remember it all. I mean, there was a silver one, and then there was like a off green one, which we originally had the C7, and then they had an updated version called the C5. My dad got the C5, which was a silver top loader Betamax tape, and
that's right. They were top before front loaders. Yeah. Now, I mean, I'm just, one of the things, I'm just grateful to have sort of grown up in the home video era, in the 80s, because it did just open up so much in terms of being able to see films. And of course, lots of things just went to video, didn't they? And used to rent them from the local video library and stuff. So happy days indeed.
They were happy days. Did you experience VHS when you were growing up, or was it DVDs with you, Finn?
Oh no, I was in the VHS area. I had the very tail end of my dad's beta tape, and then we had VHS, and we did the whole recording the shows, the movies that were on, like, you get Showtime free for a weekend, you got to record the movies that are on there. And,
So well, of course, before DVRs, that was the thing, wasn't it? It was using the we had like in the UK, so weird to think of now, but we only had 4 channels, and if we wanted to watch something on one of them, the beauty was we could record something off the other one, which any young people watching this now are going to be like, what? But, now we've just got everything on demand. You
come across tapes that you wanted to save that cough your sibling decided to record over because they didn't have anything else at that moment, and so you're like going through your show and 15 minutes in and it cuts to something else, and you're like, what did you do?
Yeah, but used to there was a little tab on the Betamax where you had to get a screwdriver and break it so you couldn't record over it, and the VHS had it on its spine. So if you took that little square off the VHS, that means you couldn't record over it. It was permanently, unless you put tape over it, and then you can record over it. But I remember those days. Those days were fascinating to me because as growing up, wanting to be a filmmaker and not having access to anything, whether it be a camera, a cine camera, or anything, the closest thing to movies was watching movies, and going to a Blockbuster Video for. First of all, if you find out that a film is coming out that you really want to see, you have to get to Blockbuster at 9 o'clock in the morning, Friday. Otherwise, by the time it comes to Saturday, all the copies are out. Do you know what I mean? They're all out. And so, we used to get up 9 o'clock in the morning, wait till Blockbuster open, rush in there. So have you got so-and-so? They go, yeah, it's over there. Rent it out for the weekend. And we only had the weekend to watch it.
I used to have a Saturday job in Blockbuster when I was a kid.
So did I. Yeah.
And I used to save those for me. Those like they're going home with me tonight, and put them under the counter or whatever. Yeah.
But I used to I worked at Blockbuster Video in Clapham Junction, and because they used to have Blockbuster Video in Clapham Junction, and I used to wear those stupid shirts. But then people got to know me, and they would come up to me and say, "What do you recommend for the weekend?" And I'd be like, "Sure." So I guess I was there for a year, and then I left. But when I was at college, I used to work at this this department store and Blockbuster. So because the government gave you a grant at that moment, and it wasn't enough. you had to compensate, and I was doing 2 jobs just to go through my course, kind of thing. But they're fond memories. They really are fond memories, and I love those days. It's a shame. Well, progress, I guess. I don't know. But it was a family thing when you rented a film out. It was really, the family would sit down with popcorn, and I remember when it all disappeared. It disappeared because somebody introduced a computer game into our house, and then suddenly we were playing computer games rather than watching films. And that's where that's when it kind of died for us, basically. But anyway, I'm going off in the tandem here. But I don't know. As I said, I don't know. But
so
yeah,
going off of the whole, loosely tying it back when we're going into technology and whatnot. You don't think that they should keep remaking this movie, right? Because you feel like it's been done. You can't really, or like Keith, do you think that there is a way to I don't know. I was trying to gauge your luck there.
Yeah, I mean, I did. They obviously they have tried to remake it. In the last 20 years, well, literally 20 years ago, wasn't it, with that Chris Rock one? But I mean, things always get remade and come around. But I think if they were going to do it now, they need to make it.
It would be a woman.
Up to States or something. They need to make it. They can make a mini series. They need to do something different. I think. I mean, as I said, I hadn't seen this, but I still was fully entertained by both of them. Actually, even when I watch something from like the 40s and whatever, I think, man, I should. It's only really the big famous stuff or the Hitchcock films or stuff like that I know, but there's so many movies from that era that were just fantastic. And
as I said, I find films fascinating, and I always try and find out why it works. Why does a film work? Why does this film work, and why does this film doesn't work? Do you know what I mean? And I kind of found out by watching really what things work and what and also finding out the shortcuts, because there's more shortcuts in 70s films and kind of coming up to 80s films than today's films. When you watch today's films, it's like they've lost the art of making films. But as I said, that's just me. Maybe I'm just old school and don't understand what they're doing today. Who knows?
Well, I think also. And again, this is a bit of a sweeping generalization, but I think the period that you're talking about, where you sort of focus on the 70s and whatever, that was for the actual film industry, that was a very different time, because obviously that was post the sort of studio system of films, which had been sort of the state of play since the beginning of, well, essentially talkies, since that beginning era of cinema, and that had gone on for quite some time. But then when the 70s came, and you had this sort of deal with independent filmmaking, and directors allowed to be much more in control, and this was a period of time before the studios were sort of taken over by corporations. I think now, because of the sheer amount of money involved in everything now, you end up with so many people in the decision making chain that that often, unless you are making an independent film or you're big enough in the industry, like a sort of Christopher Nolan, to make exactly what you want to make. I think the problem is that we're talking about a lot of money, so with a lot of money comes a lot of interference, I think, and I think the 70s was that kind of in between stage where there was less of that. I mean, obviously it still existed, but I just think maybe filmmakers could be a little bit more risky and experimental in some respects, and but it's also, I also do believe it's nostalgia for the time that you grew up in as well.
Definitely.
You know, I always believe that, I always feel like movies that you see as a kid between the ages of like 6 and 12 are always really, no, but there's always really something about those films or TV shows or whatever that get,
and music kind of as well.
It kind of forms who you become to a certain extent, and those are really formative years because you're old enough to sort of know what's going on and understand things, but there's still loads to learn, and you haven't quite got to teenagehood, and I don't know, there's something magical about that time, and I find a lot of the things I like from that era are not necessarily, if I look at them objectively now as an adult, they're not necessarily good films or well-made films or good shows, but they mean something to me. Do you know what I mean? I'm sure you've got stuff like that as well, Finn, right? From your
Spider-Man.
Spider-Man, yes.
I don't like Spider-Man.
What gave you that idea?
Hate the guy.
And, you know, a lot of these films you're mentioning, Ian, I guess you were somewhere in that sort of age bracket when you saw them, right?
Yeah, I was, but it didn't, you know, like with some people that grow out of stuff, you know, it's obvious that Finn didn't grow out of Spider-Man, let's put it that way.
Into Spider-Man, thank you.
But it's the same thing with me, with films, all kinds of genres. I never grew out of it. Sometimes I wish I did, because it's kind of trying to make films and watching films kind of dominates most of my life, which when you think about it, it's kind of sad. But you know,
I get it. I totally get it. Yeah.
But you know, it's you know, it never went away for me. And I remember you guys being creatives, all of, you know, you two, you must have had your mum or your dad say to you, once you get a proper job, that's the point where you're just like, please don't tell me that, you know what I mean? Because this is what I want to do. You know, it's when they say that to you, reality comes crashing down.
but also that was, you know, to be fair, that was that different time. I mean, you know, it was a lot more challenging, but before the new millennium, trying to make anything was pretty hard, because having access to you know, equipment and requiring more people, and you know, that very analog process of it all before before the 2000s or whatever, you know, it was different. Whereas now everybody's a filmmaker. You know, everybody has a computer and a smartphone, and you know, it's just much more possible now. I mean, it's still hard to make something good, obviously, but you know, it's much less of a sort of frowned upon thing in terms of a life or career choice than it was back in the 80s and 90s, I guess, you know.
I mean, like I guess as I said, you know, it does hit you when you're quite young. Things that you love. I mean, I would have even applied this to music as well. There's certain songs that you hear that suddenly takes you back suddenly to when you were 5 or even 12 or even when you were in high school, you know, and I think films do the same thing with you as well. Once you watch a film, you know, you be potting around in your house, and then your TV's on, and then suddenly something's on, and you just go, oh my God, I haven't seen this in ages. You end up sitting there watching it all, and it just takes you back, doesn't it? It takes you back to,
for sure.
And this is, as I said to Finn, this is one of the reasons why I wanted to do this. I mean, Heaven Can Wait is kind of a guilty pleasure for me. And I just want to talk about films that affected us when we were younger, not necessarily younger, but films that are not well known to people, but you like it because I like Heaven Can Wait because it reminds me of Easter, and it reminds me of the time of VHS and the time where all our family was trying to stay awake watching 3 Rocky films and, and stuff like that. It reminds me of that stuff. So there must be films that you watched and it brought you back to that moment in time, which makes it special for you. So
For sure.
don't know. Yeah,
Plenty
there
of them.
must be, right?
Plenty of them.
Plenty of them.
I said there's loads of them. Yeah. But no, this is good. This is good to, as I said, to find something that I wasn't familiar with. I kind of like that. And Finn obviously likes it. Otherwise, he wouldn't keep asking to do these, right?
Oh, good taste. What can I say?
Maybe the next one should be the Nicholas Hamilton Spider-Man for Finn. The TV Spider-Man.
Yeah.
Oh. No.
Do you know though? Again, we don't want
to hurt his eyes.
No, seriously though, what we were talking about, right?
Yeah.
Exactly that for me. Like those films played in the UK in the sort of mid '80s or whatever, and as a kid, adolescent or whatever at the time, I really actually, and I know I've seen them as an adult. They're not particularly well made. I mean, basically everything had to be done practically back then anyway. So some of the stunt work, I suppose, was actually quite good for when it was. But they're not great. But I do have, in fact, annoyingly, they're not available on on DVD or Blu-ray.
Have them.
Yeah, probably not. But you see, I don't know whether you remember, Ian, but in the UK they were. I remember the series being on TV, but I think before that, weren't they theatrical? I never saw them theatrically.
Yeah, so basically, right? Just to inform Finn, so when Spider-Man was released in America, the TV version, we didn't get it.
It was late 70s, wasn't it?
Huge, yeah, because we used to read in Starlog and there's magazines over here, Starlog and Starburst, that Spider-Man, they show pictures of him in a costume, and it would just blow our mind. And before they actually showed the TV show over here, what they would do is, if you had a 6-parter of a Spider-Man adventure, they'd stick them all together and play them in the cinema for us. So and then we would have to go to the cinema to watch it as a movie, and then eventually it ends up on TV. But I remember they did that to Spider-Man. The Dragon's Challenge was one of them, and the first Spider-Man, the pilot. Yeah, and then in the pilot version there were more bits in it than the TV version because they cut out bits of the TV version, and then they did that to Buck Rogers as well. Before we saw Buck Rogers on TV, Buck Rogers was a movie in the cinema, and if you saw the movie version, they had bits in it that the TV version didn't have, like the music in the beginning, like James Bond with all the girls. Remember that? Oh, he's going to get Buck Rogers, obviously. Look, there you go.
This is the Kino Lorber Blu-ray release of just that, and what you get is the theatrical version, which, like you said, is kind of the James Bond / Burt Reynolds in space that they were trying to do, and then you get the series where they were edited slightly differently and all of that, and you get like 2 seasons of that plus the pilot. And I have to say again, from childhood, I was a big fan.
Yeah, I was too. Yeah, but that's what they used to do, Finn. They used to basically, before it got released in England, they did one with Battlestar Galactica as well before it got released. Before we saw it on TV, they put and Battlestar Galactica was in Sensurround. They had this thing called Sensurround where the sound would shake the cinema. Yeah, so when they put on the poster Battlestar Galactica in Sensurround, you'd be like, "What the frick is that? We've got to go and see it for Sensurround." It was just loud Dolby. That's all it was. But there you go. But
but it's exactly these things. These sort of, when you're a kid, this stuff means something, and you can look at it objectively as an adult and think, well, actually, that's a bit naff or whatever. But then likewise, I always appreciate the craftsmanship because, again, even if these things don't particularly hold up today, you know, when they were made and done practically and stuff, there's some painstaking work that went into this, and I always kind of appreciate that as well. So but yeah, there we go. We've really gone off on a tangent, you know.
we have Heaven
To
Can Wait.
Y'all like movies, y'all appreciate good movies, and this is a good movie.
It is a good movie, you know. As I said, you know, Heaven Can Wait is not a film that's celebrated anymore, and not down in history as far as I can tell. It's mentioned here and there, but it's one of those films that it's undeniable. You can't say it's a bad film at all. No one could say it's a bad film as far as I'm concerned, unless you weren't really watching it properly. Do you know what I mean? So I'll have to try and think of another film that's not well known that we could watch. Maybe some, I don't know, I'll think of something. But that's the idea for this stream, is to pick something that people are not familiar with. And maybe somebody that's watching this could inspire them to watch it, because I actually believe that Heaven Can Wait is a classic movie, but it's not talked about, you know. And maybe we can do one for Finn, you know, the Spider-Man TV one. Maybe.
Do you know, I'd enjoy watching it if it was available somewhere. I
don't think it is. But Finn, sorry, going off on a tangent a bit. Do you know that China did their own version of Spider-Man, right? Have you seen some of it? Yeah. So it's weird, right? He has a car.
Wasn't it Japanese one?
That was Japanese. Sorry.
I think so. Yeah. It's super bizarre though, right?
Yeah. He has a car.
Given really weird things in toy form. Like I've seen Spider-Man toys with like a spider race car. Yeah. Like, oh sure, he's just like Batman. Or a spider robot. I'm like, wait, what?
You know, I had a toy, a Spider-Man toy I had as a child, which I loved, was, and again, you'll think it's nuts because it didn't actually exist, but it was a Spider-Man Jeep.
Oh,
okay, it was a Corgi die-cast Jeep, and it was just like a normal sort of like a military Jeep, but it was painted in the Spider-Man colors and had so it was red and blue, and it had the logo on the front. And then you had a little tiny figure of Spider-Man driving it. And then off the back, there was almost like a sort of tow winch thing off the back. And it had a web with the Green Goblin captured in the web. And I used to love that toy. It was amazing.
Yes, it was a bizarre toy. But
I know it had no place in, you know, that teenager Peter Parker probably couldn't afford to buy something like that. It was kind of like assuming he was a Bruce Wayne type or something. But yeah, it was a great little toy. I loved it.
Well, we'll all leave thinking about something that we might want to watch or something later. But I wanted to thank both of you for coming in the first place, and Ian for suggesting this movie. And so why don't we go in a circle? I'm going to have information on where to find you guys in like the description for the video so that people can get there. But why don't you, starting with Ian, tell us, you know, a little bit about yourself and where to find you for anybody who's curious.
Okay, usual. I've got a channel called Rebecca Gold. It's a YouTube channel, and it's free. It's got a web series called Rebecca Gold, an award-winning. People keep telling me I have to say award-winning web series, Rebecca Gold. And I have a few films on there, feature films that I've directed. One 20 years ago, one 10 years ago, which stars Keith's in two of them. And the channel also has the making of the films, and also we had on Dan's channel, which is on my channel now, we have the stars from Rebecca Gold talking about the experience they had on set and stuff like that, and Keith's in one of them as well. Well, actually, Keith's in it. So check out my channel if you want some fun, and hopefully I'll be making something new soon so I can add to the channel. Anyway, that's me. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, thanks. So obviously, I appear in as an actor in a couple of those projects, but I make films as well. So I have a YouTube channel which is British Isles, as in my name on here, EYLES, and there's some short films on there that I've written, produced, and directed. Any feedback on that's always welcome. And if you're into the physical media type thing, like DVDs, Blu-rays, 4Ks, etc., I've got another channel called Home Media Minefield, and I do unboxings, reviews, etc. of physical media. So please check that out at Home Media Minefield. And finally, I also have a podcast called Let's See What's Out There, and that can be found on all podcast apps. It's LSWOT Cast. So thank you for the opportunity. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Oh, yeah. Well, always thank you so much for coming, and I look forward to chatting with you and Ian again with movies next time.
Bye.